Good day. Welcome to part 3 of this infection-free zone playthrough in Mogadishu, Somalia. For those of you who are new here, I recommend tuning into chapter 1 to get yourself caught up. The playlist can be found on my main channel. Otherwise, I really hope this video earns your subscription and a like. Without further ado, let's return to Mogadishu. We've been granted another reprieve from the onslaught of the last swarm, and the sight of the trader is a very welcome one. While gunning down raiders was fundamentally a waste of human life, it did come with the upside that their guns and ammo could be used as bargaining chips to obtain heavier weapons. At least from death came something good, in the form of an AK-47, another shotgun, and more tools for our crops from the trader.
Let's do it. Boss, we've met some survivors. They're weird and aggressive.
Ask them to join us.
Going there.
While I'm grateful for extra hands and the settlement growing quickly, this presents another issue: hygiene and illness. The shelters are now housing, granted, and keeping clean was easier than ever, but so many people in such a small living space would be an ample breeding ground for disease and bacteria. So, to help alleviate the problem, I called upon our capable researchers to look into basic healthcare, not for a rare luxury, but because just one coughing child could bring the entire Somali exclusion zone to its knees. If that happens, I want the ability to isolate it, cure it, and get the zone back to normal with little interruptions.
Sir, we bumped into a wandering group. They've got some guns on them.
Ask them to join us.
Let's do it.
That being said, extra gun hands were well worth having regardless. Most survivors roamed Mogadishu with little more than a machete and raw willpower. So to find a group like this, who've survived long enough to arm themselves properly, they'll be worth their weight in gold, I assure you. And as it turns out, we'd need those additional shooters imminently.
Grab your guns! The infected are swarming!
And that was yet another swarm. With the sheer numbers and frequency they come to us with, it seriously makes me wonder whether the rest of Africa, the rest of the world even, all perished in the downfall. What if we were the very last bastion of humanity? What if we were the only ones left to kill, and we were just this frustratingly defiant camp that the infected just couldn't take down? And if I have any say in it, it's going to stay exactly that way. I pulled the last survivor group to headquarters, and I order them to form another squad to bolster our firepower. We won't go down that easily. AKs are picked up, shotguns are loaded, and defensive positions taken once again. Despite that threat, however, for me, it's just simply another day, another horde, and maintenance of the zone doesn't wait for me. I issued more demolition orders to be carried out in the morning, and I told the squads to dig in once more, and this time dig their heels in hard. We'd make sure that we were ready. For God's sake, we had to be.
Infected incoming! Horde spotted! Ready for action.
Our building's under attack. Won't much longer.
It was a twist of fate. The glaring morning sun forces the infected to rush indoors to prevent themselves burning up from the searing light. I ordered the troops to go house to house, hunting them down while they're scattered.
Operator, this This is big. In one of the houses, we killed 2 extremely fierce infected. Once they were down, we noticed that there was a child in there. A living, infected child. Must have been no older than 3. It ran on all 4s like an animal and jumped into the sewers before we could get it. For the love of God, if they can multiply... I don't even want to think what's gonna happen.
Let it go. Poor kid suffered enough.
An infected child that age meant one thing: birth after the downfall, which meant the infected themselves could breed. And with so many of them out there, that might mean we'd never win this war. Or that war was already lost. But by God, we had to try and push back. But right now, we've got more immediate problems. We'd have to deal with that worrying concept later. For now, there's still buildings to clear. So, one by one, doors are kicked in, windows smashed open, infected shot dead in hallways, living rooms and bedrooms. The quicker we killed them before sunset, the fewer we'd have to deal with tonight. We got lucky with this, and we were going to have to capitalise on every opportunity we got, while we still could.
New tech available.
Satisfyingly, our research team completed their foray into healthcare. This could somewhat take a leaf out of the Somali health system, which is largely privatised and regulated by the Ministry of Health. Now, this is a direct result of the public healthcare system being effectively destroyed over the course of the Somali Civil War during the 1990s. But where this sector fell, a new system of private providers and non-governmental organisations stepped in to somewhat fill that gap, hugely increasing access to clinics and medical facilities for all. In fact, just after the millennium, the new system had been so successful it increased the life expectancy of both men and women across Somalia by nearly 10 years over what it was in 1990. However, there is still a lot of work to do across the country, as, sadly, nearly 20% of Somali children sadly pass away before their 5th birthday, one of the highest rates of infant mortality in the world, with malnutrition being one of the bigger contributors. In the zone, however, we will do everything we can to make sure that the survivors here get the best care they can for men, women, and children, from wound care to immunisation and illness care. And in this zone, there shall be no bureaucracy, there'll be no red tape to cut, and more importantly, there'll be no desperate search for funding and the ability to take care of it. And good health starts with a good home. To keep roofs over all of our survivors' heads, I ordered the conversion of another apartment block and a large house to be segmented and turned into high-quality housing, turning one side of the zone into a row of residential property, a row of safe havens to rest their weary heads. With a couple of city blocks cleared and farmland in their place, we had carved out a wide open stretch of land, flanked by streets and the remains of streetlights, and lined with homes, like forming an avenue, an artery through the zone. So, we decided to name it the Jidka, a Somali word for road, or the way, when translated literally to English. It would seem a rather fitting name for our growth and progress thus far, forging the path forward for humanity. One side of Jidka would be a row of smartly built, comfortable homes. The other side of Jidka, science, processing, and food production, independent of each other, where the pollution of one would not adversely affect the other, and another way to separate labour from recreation, a small touch the citizens would appreciate. And Jidka would face an escalating threat. A pair of seasoned raiders, armed with AK-47s, roam the streets watching us sizing us up, but they quickly fled. But their scents didn't stay for long, moving in to attack from the flank instead. Those 7.62s would rend the citizens limb from limb, so I ordered the troops to occupy the nearby buildings and pincer them on approach.
Let's do it. Waiting orders. On my way. Going there. Operator, going there.
Street sweepers from the windows and sustained rifle fire meant the raiders hit the ground before the spent shell casings did. Their AKs were now ours for the taking. And as we swiped their rifles from their dead bodies, I'm made aware of a truly troubling outcome.
Chief, we had an incident last night. One of our citizens attacked his neighbor, who tried to defend but didn't stand a chance. Neither of them made it. The aggressor, we spotted signs of the infection, and this means we're not immune after all. Either that, or the virus is mutating. I'm not sure which is worse.
Inform the people. They need to be more careful now.
On my way. Sir, we've encountered a group of people. They've got some wounds from the infected.
Ask them to join us.
I knew I made a poor judgment call, but given the shock of the revelation, I'm not sure I was even listening. We'd all considered ourselves immune since the downfall. It's the reason we didn't turn in the first place, why we survived. But one of the first settlers had turned infected. Our troops did the right thing, taking him out. But how many others also had the infection? How many of us were ticking time bombs just waiting to kill those around them? And in my shock, I gave the order to allow potentially even more infected survivors into the zone. My duty was to keep people safe, and this poor call placed that duty in severe jeopardy. I sincerely hoped that wouldn't come back and bite me on the backside anytime soon.
Sir, we bumped into a wandering group. They claim to have some technical and scientific knowledge.
Ask them to join us.
Ready for action.
This time, a group of survivors had fled to the zone, their steps marred by the sounds of gunfire. They sought refuge as well as a home, and would show them that they were in good hands. I ordered my troops to defend those men and women at all costs as they ran from the bullets and taunts. The raiders certainly didn't look very tough when they realised their prey could suddenly shoot back. The troops moved in, creating a barrier between them and the raiders, and swiftly shot them dead on the concrete. One day, those fools will learn that you do not come to the zone with bad intentions, and that we will defend, down to the last ounce of blood, anyone who comes to this zone for protection. We therefore welcomed these scientists graciously into our base, where they were relieved, if not badly shaken by their near-death experience. They would undoubtedly be useful additions to our now 100-strong headcount. And tonight might be the most restful night they'll ever get. With a full moon overhead and the infested hiding in their layers, they could rest easy as we dispatch a squad to steal another car we'd marked previously. Another vehicle could pay dividends later with our growing Siadanka, our military. And another team is ordered to start scavenging for petrol. After all, a car with no fuel might as well just be a very expensive piece of cover. But this time, their scavenging came with the order to stay vigilant and look for anything that resembled a medical institute. Any supplies we could find, any medicines rather, could help us stave off the infection problem until we found something more permanent. Despite the search being focused on fuel, the squad must have stumbled across a fueling station being converted or used for something else, as they radioed to inform me of this.
We're on the... Sir, we found an old survivor's hideout. Unfortunately, he's been dead for a long time. He had a lot of electronics, and one of his computers had some data concerning work on a vaccine or a cure. It suggests that significant progress was made.
Okay, send that data, and bring in all of it.
One more thing. There are some coordinates of possible lab locations. Should we check them out?
Yes, let's check them.
Clear!
I made sure to put the research guys on those papers straight away and use it to start developing ways to start treating those showing signs of the infection and start looking into the symptoms of the illness. If anything, at least we might be able to isolate those who are turning critical or start monitoring those who began presenting those symptoms. But if those papers even hinted at the location of a laboratory potentially housing a cure, we needed to find that, and we needed to find it quickly. However, all of that shooting from earlier must have emboldened the raiders nearby. 7 of them, in fact. 7 raiders move in on the zone, probably hoping that we were recovering from the earlier fight, or maybe in disarray. They ran in, machetes in hand, to try hacking their way into the housing blocks we'd set up. Unfortunately for them, we were ready.
The infected are pillaging a building.
On my way. No more to find. Clear!
It took the combined efforts of 3 squads to bring down that group. They had some guts, and they had some serious stones on them to try it, especially when they could see just how big the zone had become. Fortunately for us, the building they took most interest in was an uninhabited housing block which we hadn't yet finished. A few machete marks on the old front door, and a few ruined hinges are easy to replace. Our citizens' lives, on the other hand, most certainly cannot. Even though we were quick to bring down that threat, that still didn't stop me taking the ever-cautious approach and ordering the new blocks to be immediately fortified with yet more brick inlays and painted over with our seemingly ubiquitous bright white facade, with the number of buildings now seeming to sport this look around the place. The isolation zone was beginning to look much less like that of a refuge and resembled more like an actual home. Soon, that dark roofing and the bright white fronting would be a trademark of hope, a trademark of survival, and hopefully a sign not to be messed with if you come close to it with bad intentions. That very style would signal to any honest man and woman in Mogadishu that you were safe when you could see it around you. But with this place acting like seemingly a magnet for raiders, I can't wait for the day that they learn to steer clear of us. Or at least the day that we build walls so high that they don't even think it viable to come within 100 miles of this place. That was the dream that we're working towards. But a dream like that would have to be achieved slowly, step by step. And one key breakthrough to achieving that goal comes through: the ability to carry out complex surgery. This would prove critical in providing pre-downfall medical care for our sick and injured residents. For our troops, that meant the ability to remove bullets from wounds and suture deep cuts sustained out in the field and injuries from the infected. For the citizens, it's a bed to get intravenous medicine, high-quality illness care. I wanted to ensure capacity, so I chose the best candidate I could in terms of premises, a 4-story apartment block. Walls can be taken out to create wards, a children's bedroom used for an isolation room, an old bathroom refitted into an exam chamber, and each floor, all the way down, would be a good way to segment a few different departments, and maybe even provide a place to isolate those at risk of turning into infected until someone could call for the help they desperately needed, even if that help came in the form of a soldier with an AK-47 in hand and orders to shoot to kill on sight. but before we could get the construction off and running, it wasn't the doctors arriving, it was the infected coming in first. Just a small horde, this time from the northeast of the isolation zone.
Our building is under attack.
As I watch the bodies fall, it makes me think that the new recruitment plans are already paying off. Having an additional fire team on patrol was greatly alleviating the threat of being spread too thin. Not to mention, it effectively gave us eyes everywhere, as well as the back of our heads. That earlier warning meant the remaining teams would have ample time to reposition within Jidka before the swarms arrived, maximising our chances of coming out alive. You see, after 5 or 6 swarms, I would have expected our soldiers to have all the classic signs of stress and fatigue, with a 1,000-yard stare, or extreme paranoia, or at least white knuckles from gripping their rifles too tightly, but they seemed to show no signs of wavering. They remained steadfast in their mission of keeping the citizens around them safe. I find that determination encouraging, surprising even. I admit I sometimes wish I had some of that gusto when I see the list of issues piling up day by day, usually longer than my arm, and requiring my swift and undivided attention. I do sometimes wish they could bestow that to me. Alas, I am but one man. You see, even if I wanted the time to pause and reflect, I wouldn't even get that luxury here. Reflection was something only the men and women on the ground were afforded, and they were tucked away at night in their houses and their shelters, hopefully with a full belly and a secure door. A secure door that I helped build for them. And right now, the more men and women who I could give that luxury to, the less I'd need to do it myself. It's ironic, isn't it, when you think about it? Them, our citizens, they're able to pause, reflect, think and feel, and rest easy. Mainly because I can't.
Chief, we've stumbled upon some people. They've got some guns on them. Chief, this is important.
Ask them to join.
Group of people are wandering around.
Quality moment of hesitation as my finger had hovered over the send button just a few seconds longer than it normally would. I'm not entirely sure why. Capacity concerns within the zone? Perhaps. A moment of weakness? Maybe. Was I just tired? A perfectly reasonable assumption. And nonetheless, the more guns we had to hand, the more we could expand the troops, and the more zone coverage we could ultimately achieve. Eventually, I managed to shake the hesitation out of me at last, and returned the call to ask them to issue an invite to the wandering group. With the new apartments fortified now, there'd be space for them to enjoy a well-deserved hot meal.
Sir, we've bumped into a wandering group. They have some resources. What's more, they seem to be strong and hard-working. However, they haven't eaten for a few days.
Ask them to join us.
On my way. On my way. Boss, we've met some survivors. They're weird and aggressive. On top of that, some were wounded by the infected.
Send them away.
Going there.
You see, I had already gotten lucky once. The previous group of survivors, which had wounds from the infected, had fortunately not turned on the rest of the citizens in the zone. But I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Not, at least, until I had provisions to treat or isolate them. All it would take, after all, is just one to turn feral and attack the field hands or the residents in their houses, and we'd have a full-blown epidemic on our hands. And that is exactly how we would go extinct. One infection to the other, person by person we fall. Now that is a reality that I will have absolutely no hand in bringing about. It pains me to do it, but the safety of the masses trumps the safety of the few. That is a stance I'm not willing to change, even as the hospital is completed. And believe me, I'm excited to see it. Despite the city resembling a wasteland, this facility had completely sterile surgery rooms, adapted from living spaces and kitchens, and clean sanitary wards with hospital beds for the sick. You see, it's often said that the first sign that scientists look for when determining whether a new species is civilized or not is by looking for healed bones from previous fractures or breaks. Now that we have the facility to treat exactly that kind of injury, was that truly a sign that we were once again becoming civilized? Had we become uncivilized at all? Researchers, nurses, doctors, it certainly made me think, where exactly does that line start? And where does that line end? Now let me tell you, that wasn't a question that Mogadishu is going to let me ponder for very long.
Stop working. Start winding down for some rest. Ill people will burn soon.
Now you see, that is exactly what I was afraid of. Within the apartment block, one citizen, fortunately living on their own, turned into an infected and attempted to break out into the general population. We were fortunate that a squad was on hand to hear the disturbance and to take swift action, shooting him dead in the doorway before he caused a major disaster. Now that the infection was confirmed to be within our midst, the citizens needed to know to stay on guard. Now, not only did we have to watch the perimeter for the infection on the outside, we now needed eyes everywhere on the would-be infected on the inside. We make sure to choose 4 healthy individuals and bring them to the headquarters to get them armed up. This idea would be our 7th squad to patrol the zone and to be on the lookout for the chaos within. It's an admittedly tragic situation, having to have men on night watch in what should be considered as everyone's safe haven, but it was a necessary evil. Why? Because just one rogue infected, left unchecked, could kill countless others and infect every other living person in the zone. So, literature is issued to citizens for signs to watch for and how to raise the alarm to those who have guns. Tragically, however, there's no cure when a citizen falls infected, other than 2 bullets through the brain. It's horrible, but it's better that than to lose half of our population in the zone. Although, despite the desperately bleak outlook within the zone, at least we won't need to worry about the outside tonight. We wouldn't even end up fighting them in the streets, as the swarm and the sun race each other. We're relieved when the sun ends up victorious, forcing them into the buildings once again and separating them from each other. Not one to look a gift horse in the mouth. Like before, I issue the order to once again go house to house, slaughtering them while they seek shelter.
We're not alone here. Sir, we're in a building full of the infected, and they've cut off our escape. We've barricaded ourselves in the basement, but we can't get out now. Can you send a squad to fight them off and help us?
Wait there. I'll send a squad immediately.
Ready for action.
Thank God the team leader was able to radio out for assistance. I quickly switched the radio channel to 2 more of my squads armed with AK-47s, and I dispatched them swiftly to head to the abandoned building.
Building repurposed.
Sir, we have encountered a group of people. They've got some wounds from the infected.
Ask them to join us.
Now gathered outside the building, they're ordered to strike.
We're on the move. We're under attack! Infected inside! Infected! Chief, there are too many of them! We won't make it! God damn it! Save yourself! I'll hold them off! Run! No! We're not leaving you behind! We're on the move! On my way! Ready for action. On my way. Reporting. Waiting orders. We're on the move. This house is infected! Look here! We're inside! This house is infected! Receiving.
I tensely radioed in for an update, over and over and over again. It sounded like a war zone going on out there. But when the dust had finally settled and the radio line cleared once again, one of the squad members called back, very solemnly, to inform me that their team leader had been killed. The rescue had saved 3 out of 4. I angrily stare at the wall, that nagging feeling that I'd made the wrong call ordering them to clear those houses out. But I knew it was the only call I reasonably could have made. I knew that losing people was going to be effectively an inevitability, but it didn't make the reality any less harsh or easier to digest. But with a breath, I ordered them to take the leader's weapons and to bring his body back to be given a proper burial, a proper send-off, with the honours he deserved. But despite the loss of a squad leader, a decorated squad leader, the troops around me were still gnawing for more action, for more things to shoot at, and plenty of the citizens lined up to volunteer just to do it. So I put my pride to one side, and I brought in 4 more strong and able people to train into an 8th team, and I made the unprecedented choice to send one of my veteran fire teams out into the nearby Degmada, far outside of operating range, to perform an expedition. It was certainly a gamble, the potential of losing a squad and one of our precious vehicles, but they were itching to go, and I wasn't going to refuse.
Chief, can you hear me? We're beyond the range of our basic radio. We'll scavenge this entire area for resources and look for anything of interest. Let's hope this place isn't infested. Chief,
Ready for
we
action.
finally got here. We'll scavenge this entire area for resources and look for anything of
On my
interest.
way.
Let's hope this place isn't infested.
I know they will be out of action for a while, perhaps even a few days, but they were very keen to be out there. And being outside of radio range means that keeping in touch with them will be difficult, or at the very best situation, spotty. This, I'm sure, will be a very tense few days waiting for them to check in.
The ill are turning into infected.
Another infected citizen, this time in the hospital, safely restrained and isolated, just as I would ideally want them to be. I can't say it feels good ordering a squad to administer a dose of buckshot against them while they struggle in the hospital bed, but we don't physically have any other choice. And while they deal with the hospital,
Roger. Let's do it.
War won't hold much longer. Our building is under attack.
Now, there might have been 80 or more infected in that swarm incoming, but I must admit, my heart rate was far lower dealing with that, with 32 armed men instead of a measly 20. Despite their numbers, they still couldn't get close to our citizens. Now that is a promising sign indeed.
Sir, we've encountered a group of people. They have some resources.
Ask them to join us.
Let's do it.
Now somehow, that group had avoided the entire swarm that night, staying quiet, bunkered down in a bedroom. With stealth skills like that, the least we could do was offer them the sanctuary of the zone. And we'd certainly need them. With the next city block now finally levelled, this expanded Jidka and its sightlines substantially. Where crumbling stone had once stood, fertile soil now replaced it. This allowed for the commission of yet 3 more farm plots, complete with a storage of compost and fertiliser to boost production, just like the other farms. This was what, for now at least, ensured a steady, reliable source of food for everyone within Jidka. Though with one problem solved, another starts up. I order our doctors to look into early diagnosis. We all knew the symptoms by now. The blind rage, the bleeding gums, the convulsions. But I wanted to find it earlier than that, to make it treatable. But no sooner had I ended transmission, giving that order, did we hear this.
Large group of the infected incoming!
It was as though the city was desperate to kill us, as though we ourselves were an infection that those wretched things wanted to eradicate, the white blood cells within the body, so to speak. For a second swarm in as many nights would undoubtedly leave us begging for reprieve. But we had no choice. They might well strike tonight, so I order the fire teams to brace themselves yet again and prepare for chaos. And with these constant swarms, constant attacks, will come constant damage. A very valid case for ordering construction of a repairman's workshop. This will mean that several dedicated citizens in high-vis jackets make repairing the zone and keeping us safe their very top priority. But before then, survivors rush towards the zone, pursued by riflemen. I swiftly order an ambush. That stealthy group of survivors from earlier might have hidden from the swarm, but it seems they couldn't hide from a pair of hardened AK-47 wielding raiders. But they couldn't hide from us, as, like the infected swarms and their misguided friends before them, they meet their end, face down on the roadside, their rifles ours for the taking. Their lives were definitely wasted, but the supplies they brought meant we could arm more of our own against any more of them who came. And with the survivors we just rescued, we have need of more houses. I order the commission of another apartment block for 33 homes, the beginning of what we now know as the Hoyga Degmada, the shelter district, or the shelter of the district in English. Secure, clean, a world away from what we'd struggled through up until now. Finally, the blood, sweat and tears were buying us something real. And this building boom in the zone here might be just what Somalia really needs right now, with much of Somalia's 19 million population having been displaced by the recent years of conflict. Many of them seek refuge in cities like Mogadishu, ending up, sadly, in informal settlements and camps. In fact, nearly 72% of those living in Somalia's urban areas, 1 million households no less, live in very poor conditions, such as in makeshift shacks and shelters. These lack substantial protection from the elements and with inadequate security and sanitation. That in itself is a stark reminder of why safe and stable shelter can mean everything. And within our zone, we'll make sure nobody goes without.
There are some people here.
Ready for action.
Send him here. We'll see what he's got.
As I ordered the expeditionary squad to send the trader our way, we laid the fallen squad leader to rest as the sun dipped over Mogadishu once more. Now, I certainly couldn't pretend things were perfect. I'd just replaced his position, unceremoniously I will admit, by another squad member. But at least the toil we were all putting in was paying off now. We had homes like the ones that we'd lost, real ones, high quality medical care. We had cars to drive. We had blue collar jobs and we had white collar jobs, and nobody in the zone was going hungry. As long as we kept this up, living normally one day, that could potentially become a reality, and I was going to make sure it became a reality, even if that needed 1,000 guns a night positioned on tall walls to make it so. And speaking of guns, the merchant was happy to part with another AK-47, another shotgun, and 2 hand tools for the price of 4 pistols. Enough steel to birth yet another fire team. Knowing the swarm hadn't made it to the zone last night, I knew they'd be here when the sun next went down. Like clockwork, I designate the troops to defensive positions, into the warehouse, into the HQ, the barn, the science centre, and the new Hoyga Degmada. We held our breath, but this time I knew there was something wrong about this one.
Fort, spotted! Waiting orders. There are some infected around here. Another one incoming!
And holy hell, that's when we saw it. Big, hulking, glowing with rage and bloodlust, skin like fleshy chainmail, an alpha infected, moving in for the kill. We have to focus fire now.
On my way. We're on the move.
That freak ran into the house right beside the barn, and my god did he do a number on it. Brick reinforcements shattered in one punch from those damn wrecking balls he had for fists. Steel supports bent out of shape in a single strike. The day I send a squad into that house to fight that alpha on his terms is a day that Satan will be skating to work. We make sure to kill off the rest, and I leave squads with their guns trained on every way out of that damn building. We pray that he doesn't re-emerge, but if he does, we'd be ready with a barrage of ammunition with his name on it. When I was satisfied that Alpha was on lockdown, and only then did I turn my attention to the zone's daily duties. Another round of demolition, not for farms this time, but because the houses that stood there were simply too far gone to repurpose. But what we couldn't make use of as a whole, we could smash up and use in part. Given the circumstances right now, the sounds of sledgehammers, grunts and falling bricks made for a rare, comforting sound to distract us from the fact that a bloodthirsty monster stood just mere yards from the workers. If it had its own way, they'd all be in pieces already. Citizens walk past tense soldiers, careful not to cross their sights as they nervously continued their work. And to keep us airtight from the infected, both in and outside of the zone, I take the unprecedented step of stationing an armed squad full-time in the hospital. With the snarls and growls of the Alpha within earshot of our citizens, I wanted to make sure that we were fully airtight from the infected, both inside and outside of the isolation zone. I therefore take the unprecedented step of stationing an armed squad full-time in the hospital. Their one and only job? To patrol that building and put the newly infected to sleep, permanently if required. But I make sure their orders were to do it quickly, painlessly, and humanely. Each one we had to do this to, at the end of the day, was a hard-working member of our community before they turn infected, and none of them deserve to suffer like that. Believe me, it pained me to take this step, but for the sake of the zone, this is something we just simply cannot afford to take the chance on anymore. Our squads stand guard, their weapons still pointed at doorways, at windows, hell, even pointed at the rooftop of that damn building, just waiting. But we knew, as the sun began to fall over the city and the moon began to rise to take its place, tonight, we all knew what that meant.
The door won't hold much longer.
Even all by itself, it takes the sheer determination of 4 highly trained men with shotguns, emptying them into him at point-blank range through the slits in the windows, and rapid fire from no less than 8 AK-47s to finally tear this oversized freak down and leave him bleeding and lifeless on the concrete floor. The hulking bastard must have been at least 5 times the size of the others. God, I hope none of the citizens in this zone are going to turn into one of these, or God help us, we're all finished. It takes 6 of my strongest men just to lift the accursed corpse out of our zone. And with dozens of bullet wounds, bleeding injuries and ruptured flesh, those volunteers must have had one hell of a strong stomach not to have lost their lunch and dinner while doing it. Thank God the citizens didn't have to be awake to see this. And just as the troops returned from this terrible job, dusting off that monster's guts from their vests, the radio crackles back into life once more.
Ready to head back to HQ.
Operator, there are signs of a shootout here. We found like 50 infected bodies. He must have been killed by some high-caliber precision headshots. Whoever it was, they were seriously professional.
Understood. Watch yourself.
And as I end that call, my mind is cast back to the tank tracks of the dead safe zone from earlier. Were they by chance connected? Was it that mystery rogue military force out there slaughtering the infected for self-preservation? As part of their orders? Hell, for sport, maybe. Question is, what if our zone became their orders? If they're still out there, I hope their crosshairs never fall on us.
Operator, we've come in contact with some people. They're weird and aggressive. Some of them, however, are carrying guns.
Send them away.
As much as I wanted to accept them, they would never surrender their weapons at the door like the rest of the survivors we take in. Unloaded guns, aggression, paranoia, and a zone-wide lookout for internally infected citizens was a recipe for disaster. It pained me once more, but I maintain it was the right call to send them away. But on a much brighter note, despite the illness and the threats that we face, our citizens had started to feel comfortable enough in their surroundings not just to survive, but some had actually bore children, the next generation, born to a world they didn't deserve to experience, but experience it they would nonetheless. In a world held together by rifles and prayers, we owed these children something so much better, and we would die trying to build it. So I commissioned the building of a kindergarten. And with the next generation forming, we'd reached a new level of prosperity, but with it, a new level of worry for what might come next. worries that you'll find out more about in episode 4 of this Mogadishu playthrough. If you've made it this far through the video, thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the content, please consider leaving a like and possibly subscribing to my channel. Make sure that you hit that notification bell below so you don't miss what comes next here in Mogadishu. Stay tuned for episode 4.